Hi, and welcome back to Museum at Home. Today we are uncovering the life of Queen Elizabeth I, one of history's most famous female monarchs. Elizabeth ruled for 45 years, and in that period she oversaw war and peace, religious change, attempted invasions, discoveries, developments in poetry, playwriting and art as well. It was a turbulent and chaotic time, and we are going to find out a little bit more about life in Elizabethan England by looking at a picture of the Queen herself from that time. So take a look at this image. Let's use our key question words to frame our thoughts. What? What does this image show? What different objects and people can we see? And what can we learn from them? Who? Who is the central figure? What clues do we have as to who it might be? Who made this image? Why? Why was this image made? Was it made to impress people? To show someone in a good light? What was the reason, the motive for this picture? How? How was the picture made? What materials were used to make it? And when? When was it made? All these are really useful questions that we can start to use to think about this picture and what it can tell us about life in Elizabethan England. So let's start with what. What can you see in this image? Well, there are a few obvious clues as to who we are looking at. Now, this is clearly someone very important. Take a look at the dress. The dress is covered in gems, in jewels, and in embroidery. There's a coat of arms, a shield in the top right-hand corner of the picture that shows a family crest. It's got to be someone important. But there are three very important clues that tell us that this person is royal. Can you spot what they could be? One is very obvious, the beautiful jewelled crown which sits on the head of the figure. There's another crown as well. Can you spot the second one? Look at the coat of arms, the shield in the corner. Spot the crown on the top? That tells us that we are looking not just at an important family's crest, but at a royal crest. But there are other clues too. Can you see what the figure has in her hands, what she's holding? Now, those two objects are an orb and a sceptre. And these two objects are seen to be the most important symbols of the monarchy, of royalty in England. The orb represents the world. Look at the shape, it's a sphere. And the cross above it represents the idea that the monarch is God's representative on earth. The sceptre, well, that represents the monarch's duty of care over the people that they rule over. A bit like a shepherd with a crook. So together, the orb and the sceptre, these two objects that the figure here holds in her hands, are symbols of power and authority. And an orb and sceptre are still used today as images to show when someone is crowned. So it is fairly clear that we are looking at a picture of a queen, and it is Queen Elizabeth I. Now, this is an engraving, a print which has been made by cutting an image into a plate of metal, then covering it in ink and pressing it flat onto paper to create an impression, an engraving. And it was made when Queen Elizabeth I was 59 years old. But what can we learn about life in Elizabethan England just from this one engraving? Well, first of all, let's have a look at her clothes. Now, she's wearing something rather large around her neck. Can you see it? What is it? Well, That is something called a ruff. And in Elizabethan England, it was the height of fashion. Now, a ruff is a very stiff collar, very uncomfortable because it's quite hard to move in it. Now, men, women and children would all wear them, and they would be made from a stiffened material, something like linen, or even, if you were really wealthy, made from something like beautiful lace. Now, to us, in the modern day, it seems a really strange idea, but during the reign of Elizabeth I, a ruff was more than just a fashion choice. It was a status symbol. In the same way that we like to drive the snazziest, fastest, most expensive car, or have the most expensive handbag, well, the Elizabethans used a ruff, and the ruff told everyone how wealthy you were. And because it restricts movement and it makes you stand extremely tall and straight and stops you from moving around much, well, that meant that ruffs were really only worn by those who didn't need to move very much, and that meant the very rich and wealthy. So your ruff said an awful lot about you. What can we say about Elizabeth's ruff in this picture? Well, it's enormous and highly decorated. It's not a plain and simple ruff, it's very ornate. Elizabeth is telling the world that she is a ruler and that she is wealthy, all using her clothing. Now, colour was very important as well. Although this is a black and white print, Elizabeth I was keen on certain colours and not others. Now, that's nothing new. Colours have always shown wealth and status and importance. During the reign of some Roman emperors, only the emperor himself was allowed to wear a particular shade of purple. That was restricted for the emperor. No one else could wear it. But Elizabeth's problem was with one particular colour, and that colour was blue. And she issued a decree that her subjects must not wear blue. Why not? Well, because blue is the colour of the Scottish flag. And Elizabeth I had long-standing disagreements with her Scottish neighbours, and so she forbid the colour blue. And have a look at the dress itself that she is wearing. Is it plain? Look very closely. You'll see that it is covered in rich embroidery, in decoration that covers the sleeves and the bodice, the front of the dress. Now, this was probably silver and gold thread, a sign of great wealth and social importance. And only certain people could wear such luxurious clothes. Elizabeth again issued a proclamation in 1597 that only earls, high-ranking noblemen could wear cloth of gold. Only knights could wear long silk stockings and nobody beneath them. And no one beneath the rank of the wife of a baron's eldest son could wear silver or gold lace. So all these rules were really important and allowed people to identify, to spot how important or wealthy other people were. Clothes were tightly regulated so that everybody knew their place in Elizabethan England. And finally, look at the text around the portrait of the Queen. Now, it isn't in English, so can you guess what language it could be? It is Latin, which was still very often the language used for official documents. Now, educated children would be taught not only to write in Latin, but also to speak it, to hold conversations in Latin. So it played a big role in education. And Elizabeth was extremely educated and able to translate Latin. Last year, historians believe that they had uncovered translations of Roman historical documents which were made by Queen Elizabeth I herself. Now, this isn't surprising because we know that Elizabeth could use French, Italian, Spanish and Greek, in addition to Latin and English. So she was clearly a really good linguist and great with languages. But what is very surprising is that the historians noticed that her handwriting was actually rather messy. So, if you've enjoyed this topic of the Elizabethans, then head to the resource pack and have a go at some Elizabeth-themed activities. And you can find that by clicking on the link under this YouTube video or by going to the Museum at Home website. And join me next week as we look for the Sphinx in ancient Egypt and uncover more about this ancient Egyptian mythical creature. So, see you next time for another Museum at